Hello and welcome to Pee-wee Bad Builds, FalsePrelate here. Today I want to take a look at the build I've been playing for Metamorph League Start. It is a Bladestorm Slayer. And a lot of other people have been playing Bladestorm, but I think most of the builds I've seen have been Champion, Gladiator, and Juggernaut. So definitely the Gladiator is strong because you get the block and you get the explosions and whatnot. But I really wanted to focus on the area of effect on this guy and get the leech from the Slayer over leech. So far, the choice for Slayer has been pretty good. I think like the biggest benefit is that because you get that big AoE range from Impact, all the trash that you're killing along the way in maps gets cleaned up very nicely. So like a lot of the problem with melee builds like this is like you have to go back and backtrack and kill things that you missed along the way, but the AoE Bladestorms on the ground are so big that basically everything dies and you don't have to backtrack as much. Another problem that I know a lot of melee builds have been having is the fact that Metamorphs are very challenging, but this build kind of stacks a lot of different types of mitigation, and honestly I haven't really had too much of an issue. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about what my vision was for this build. So the idea was I wanted to create a build that you could use a rare item in every slot and it would still function. Like there's no required unique for this build at all. Any unique that I have here, you could put a rare in that slot and it would function just as well. Let's go through the basic gearing. So we have two axes, siege axes that we dual wield. This one here I actually found is a 387 DPS one. It's pretty good. This one I just bought for like 20C. Then Sarkonjas, again, you could use like a rare helm here, with just like life and res and whatnot on it. Sarkonjas is nice because it gives you a little bit of a damage boost and it has like a really good defensive mechanic with the 100% increased global evasion when on low life. Very strong. I was able to buy a Bladestorm one for again 30C, very cheap. And then Tempest Guardian. This is just basic 6-link rare item. If I wanted to like really push this build, I'd put a Carcass Jack here for the AoE and the damage. Rare gloves, pretty basic. Attack speed, life, resistances. Red Blade Tramplers, again, you don't need these here. You could use a rare piece of armor if you wanted to. The 2 to 8 Fizz is kind of nice. Honestly, they're kind of like super bad and cheap, and honestly, I could definitely replace these with something else. Rare Amulet, physical damage to attacks, and life and resistances. Vivinsect is kind of an interesting choice here. Definitely, I don't necessarily need this, and actually the best in slot would be one of the new Warlord rings with vulnerability on hit, because I don't have a curse setup on this build at all. But this is, again, at the time was a pretty cheap option. This was like 15C when I got it. I'm not sure what it is now. The +5 to socketed aura gems is nice. I have my Bride in here, so it adds a couple of percent, so not really a huge difference. The best thing to put in here would be something like a Grace, because Grace actually gains a lot off of gem level. So you could get, if I put Grace in here, I think my evasion right now is 4k. I think I tried it and it went up to like 20k. So it's like, it's quite a bit of evasion if you decide to go Grace. But then you lose a substantial amount of DPS as well. Rings, the other ring slot is just physical damage to attacks, life, chaos res. Belt is just damage, life, and res. And then all of our flasks, same thing. They're all basic like magic flasks. I've got some poison immunity, some extra evasion, some move speed, some curse immunity, and freeze and chill immunity. And then probably the more expensive things on this build are the 2 jewels. So I've got a jewel here with like 46 or something like that % damage on it, which is pretty solid. Then this one as well is really good. One of the benefits of this build actually is that there's a lot of gem tags that work for jewels, so finding jewels is actually pretty easy. Alright, now that we've looked at the gearing, let's take a look at the skill tree and figure out what we did while we were leveling. So I started off by just picking up the life and damage nodes down here, picked up Golem's Blood, I picked up Vitality Void for the leech really early on. Then I came down here and rushed to Blood Magic as fast as I could. The reason you do this while leveling is because then you don't have to deal with mana, and it just makes everything a lot more smooth. And then I came up here to Resolute Technique next, because again, not having to deal with accuracy while you're leveling is a really big plus. And then I think I switched to Axes at this point, and I picked up Cleaving and Slaughter. After that, it doesn't really matter where you go, you can just fill out the rest of the tree. It's a good idea to pick up these Impale nodes, as the Impale nodes are really strong. And because we are Resolute Technique, that's like our big way of scaling our damage. It's not through crits. And then finally, at the end, you can just like pick these last points like Thick Skin and Constitution and this bit over here. And also we have this node, Ambidexterity. We actually have this anointed on our amulet so that we don't have to travel to it. I originally had this like in the build, like traveling all the way down to it, and I realized it's really inefficient to come all the way down here for this node when you could just put it on your amulet. And then finally our Ascendancy. So the Slayer, it's really good for Bladestorm, mainly because of this node right here, Impact. You get +2 to melee, weapon, and unarmed attack range. And 5% increased AoE per enemy killed recently, up to 50%. So that's, especially once you start like clearing maps and you're killing a lot of things, that starts to scale up really high, and you'll notice that your Bladestorm AoE gets really, really big. And then finally, the deal up to 20 or 15% more melee damage to enemies based on proximity. It's really good as well. We pick up Endless Hunger for the stun immunity and Overkill's life leech. And we pick up Brutal Fervor for the reduced damage taken while leeching and the overleech. And then your last point goes into Headsman. So this is pretty much standard pick because you don't have to take reflected damage. This is like amazing for early game mapping because you don't have to worry about re-rolling your maps and you end up saving a lot of currency. Alright, let's talk about the gem setup here. So our first one is Pride. That's in our Vivinsect ring. As I said earlier, putting something like Grace here would be like a really big benefit. You could also not put Pride in the ring and just get rid of Summon Stone Golem and put Pride there since it's the same color anyway. And then just have like a rare ring in this slot. And honestly, you would probably do more damage because you would have the added fizz on the ring, and you'd have a bit more versatility with your ring slot as well. The nice thing about the Vivinsect though is that you do get like a substantial amount of life regeneration. Alright, the second setup, we got Leap Slam, faster attacks, Fortify setup. That's pretty standard. We have a Riposte and Vengeance setup with Impale and Endurance Charge on melee stun. So this is just to help us generate endurance charges. It doesn't actually do a huge amount. I end up still casting Enduring Cry quite a bit. Really important though that you do make sure that your Impale chance is 100%, because if any of your skills are hitting the enemy and not impaling, then it's destroying your DPS. So that's really important to keep in mind. Alright, our core Bladestorm setup. So I've got Bladestorm with Rage. Rage gives like a really large amount of flat physical damage, which is really good for dual wielding. Then we've got Melee Fizz. This is a no-brainer. Impale, again, this is a no-brainer. If you're going Impale, the Impale effect is like really good. And then now even this gem has 14% more physical damage on it. So it's just definitely, if you're going Impale, best in slot. Brutality. This one's debatable. I could put Ruthless here and then use something like Hatred instead of Pride. But I just kind of like this setup right now because it works really well with the Impales. And then Close Combat. So Close Combat and Impale, both of these don't actually show up in the path of building DPS really. Like the 14% more physical damage, part of it does, but the Impale effect doesn't, and the Impales don't really show up in here. In Close Combat, if you look, if I take it off, it doesn't do anything to the damage at all. So this build does way more than 140,000 DPS. That's wildly incorrect. I'd say it's probably up in the like 900,000 to a million range. Because you've got the attack and you've got the Bladestorms. So each of these, there's 3 of these. So there's 3 times this plus your attack plus your all your impales, and then plus the 2 gems that aren't working correctly on this setup. It scales up very, very, very high. Berserk is one of those things like it's really good for fighting Metamorphs because you can just like fly through the map and never touch it, and just like keep your rage stacks really high, and then this will consume your rage to give you a less damage taken buff, and that's kind of like what we're using it for. And it actually does scale your damage like massively, but we're using it more for the mitigation than anything else, just because the Metamorphs are like they hit pretty hard. So having this for mitigation is really good. Blood Rage is just to generate frenzy charges and give you attack speed. Dread Banner, this is to help get you to that maximum impale chance. War Chief is just for the more damage multiplier. And then I have some kind of supports on here. So I got a Maim, and that actually works with the Bladestorm. Blind is just for defense to help, so when enemies are hitting you, they're not hitting you as often. And then once again, the Impale to make sure that this is at 100% chance, because if it's not, then it's going to be dropping your Impales off. And then we have a cast and damage taken Molten Shell setup. Molten Shell is pretty good. You could put one of the other guard skills in here. I think actually, because my armor isn't like too big, that it might be better to put something else in here, but I don't know. I kind of like getting the added armor from the Molten Shell. And then Summon Stone Golem again. You could totally ditch this from this setup. You don't need it, but it's just nice to have the extra 100 life regen. And Enduring Cries to just continuously be generating endurance charges. Well, that's the build. Thank you for watching, and if you liked what you saw, hit like and subscribe. Thanks, guys, and Happy New Year.